Recording in progress.
Hello and welcome to Dateline New Haven on WNHH-FM, New Haven's home for community radio. I'm Paul Bass, inviting you to look at the stories behind the headlines. Well, today we have a guy who makes headlines a lot and knows the story behind it. State Rep Roland Lemar, a regular visitor to the show. He's the 96th State Assembly District Representative, covering New Haven and parts of Hamden. He's had the seat for 15 years, and he's here to give us a sense of how the session just wrapped up in Hartford. Welcome back, State Representative Roland Lemar. Thanks so much for coming in.
Thank you again for having me.
I'm gonna ask you to pull the mic around so you're kind of looking at me, the stand, and then getting super close.
It's almost like my first time here.
It's okay. Harry's got you. And actually, I don't know how many times you've been on. You've been on a lot in our 10 years.
Yeah, I think it's probably maybe 8 to 10 times at this point. Yeah. And I know I do not represent portions of Hamden.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's just New Haven now.
Just New Haven.
Yeah.
Okay. And didn't you once have parts of East Haven?
I did, yeah.
So you always have these orphan, gerrymandered parts of your district.
So I started, 55% of my district was New Haven, 45% Hamden.
I remember that, yeah.
And then it was moved to like an 80% New Haven, 20% East Haven, and now it's just New Haven.
All right, how do you feel about that? Did you like?
Oh, I love it. I love having just New Haven. I love
So
being.
you got Worcester Square, you got East Rock.
Downtown, Yale, portions of Fairhaven, a little bit of Fairhaven Heights, and yeah, Cedar Hill neighborhood.
Is it sort of like a life dream to be a legislator like this? You've been in politics both inside and outside of government for a long time. Being a legislator, running committees, working with people to get state laws, that sort of push all your wonk and fun and sports buttons.
Yeah, it does. Like there's a number of aspects to my personality that are very well served being in the legislative body, and I enjoy running committees. I think like my real talent there is being able to run an agenda, get people on board, move products over the finish line, and have something to look at the end of session. I think the experience I got working in government for a number of years before I ever ran for office helps me quite a bit, and being able to hear people, understand people, and recognize when it's time to disagree and when it's time to move forward with good policy.
Which is a good transition to the first thing we're going to talk about today. You really disagree. So you're kind of a real, you're staked, I think, tell me if it's wrong, a position as a progressive from a city who works with everybody. You're a very loyal Democrat. You're involved in trying to have the Democratic Party win stuff statewide, be a team. And you did a tweet that really struck me last week. The governor vetoed the first significant housing law to try to deal with the housing crisis in his tenure. He's been there 2 terms now. And he vetoed a law that he'd worked with you guys to pass in the first place that would have take some baby steps trying to get the suburbs to build affordable housing.
That's right.
And then he vetoed it. And here's what you wrote, and it was just a one-line tweet, but it was really something coming from State Rep Lemar. At the end of the day, he is really just the governor of Greenwich and associated lands. That said a lot with just a few words. What moved you to write that tweet, and what you're trying to say, and to whom?
Look, I'm infuriated at this, to be honest with you. I mean, folks have used words like disappointed or frustrated. I'm infuriated at this. We've spent the better part of a decade looking at comprehensive housing proposals that would move the needle for constituents here in our state. One, we have some of the tightest real estate markets in the country. The rental occupancy rate exists around 95%, which makes it almost impossible for folks to find affordable places to live. We don't have just cause protections.
Just get close up. And just cause, you mean being able to just kick someone out of a house?
Right now, a landlord can kick someone out for lapse of time. They can just essentially say at the end of a lease, you've got to go. No real warning. Go. Good luck on the open marketplace. We don't construct anywhere near enough housing to meet the demands of today's economy. And frankly, what we proposed this year was on the backs of years and years of efforts that have been forestalled and just completely stopped by our suburban counterparts. This year, working with the governor's office, that bill 5002 negotiated with public policy advocates, civil rights advocates, business interests, and the governor's office represented the first real comprehensive piece of legislation we've been able to get through. It is really hard to move a suburban-dominated state in a housing area. And I've seen this. I used to chair the Planning and Development Committee. I used to be head of the Fair Housing Task Force. I looked at municipal housing affordability plans as part of the Connecticut Future Commission. I chaired that committee for 2 years. It's almost impossible to get suburban interests to take housing availability seriously. They've spent entire half century erecting barriers to affordable housing construction in their communities, through antiquated zoning constructs, and frankly, erecting ridiculous barriers to the idea of a private developer coming in. 5002 took some of the first small steps necessary to address this problem, and the governor spent almost a month having a tortured experience, listening to some of the worst NIMBYs in the country, the mayors and first selectmen of some of these Fairfield towns, completely demonize the bill, misrepresent its aspects, talk about things that weren't even in there, and try to scare and fearmonger people into being against 502, and the governor fell for it.
Did he fall for it? Didn't know what he's doing.
If you watched his press conferences, the governor came out and said, yeah, I know a lot of it is inaccurate. I know there's a lot of misrepresentations, but I kind of think the towns need to be bought in. No, these towns will never be bought in. They can't be bought in. They're some of the wealthiest communities in the entire world. There's no amount of money that can buy them in. You cannot convince them to do something they do not want to do. The only way we can do this is by putting real state structures in place that we accomplished in 5002. It was an embarrassing, frustrating few weeks watching the governor give voice to the people who've stood in the way of positive housing development. That's happened in a bipartisan way across the country. Connecticut's not the only state dealing with this issue.
Right. The basic idea is a liberal and conservative idea.
That's right.
That zoning regulation, over-regulation, rules that are outdated that might have been well-intentioned or meant for other purposes is stopping us from building stuff. And now people can't afford to live places. And when they can't live places, you can't develop as a community, meet challenges, get revenue right. So some stuff you did was kind of interesting in the bill. You said that no longer could a town say that you need a certain amount of parking if you're going to build apartments in a commercial district. You said that if it's up to 9 apartments, you got to say yes unless there's some special reason, right?
Yeah.
You can't reject based on parking, basically. You can't say no to somebody, and that you give them goals they're going to work toward. Are those goals are they enforceable, or is it just to have goals?
Yeah, there were goals for a number of things. One, we set fair share goals for affordable housing. Municipalities should be aware of what they need to do. If we're going to address the housing crisis, we recognize that over 100,000 units need to be brought online. If we're going to address the dramatic decrease in available units, the changing marketplace, what types of units need to be available for the Connecticut economy that exists now, the nature of family sizes decreasing, meaning there's more units necessary to serve the same amount of people or a slowly growing population. Setting fair share goals is the first reasonable step you should take. There's no enforcement mechanism behind it, but Greenwich should know how many units they need.
Can that be used then for other decisions by government about whether they'll fund something?
No, there was no provision in.
So why would a town be against that?
Because they don't want to know. They don't want in the future, at some far off time,
to have that used against the way it is in other states. Money is tied to fair share goals.
Right.
And it's even that exact term.
That's right.
So the main objection stated by Lemar after having told you to go ahead and pass this bill was, well, even if they're making up stuff, the towns aren't on board, so that it's never going to work. There's to get everybody on board. Your response to me sounds, Roland, that you're never going to have them on board because they don't want to do it under any circumstances. So it's never going to happen unless you get me on board in this. Can I hit you with some of the other people's responses? The Yankee Institute, which is very conservative, said this would have imposed one-size-fits-all housing mandates, undermining the ability of Connecticut's diverse community to shape policies suited to their own needs.
Yeah, no, communities have been using this line about we need to preserve neighborhood character. And I'll tell you, when you show up to a Board of Zoning Appeals hearing or a city plan commission or town planning and zoning commission meeting in one of these communities, what they mean by character is what you think they mean by character. They oppose anything that has multiple units. The idea that we need to preserve our unique status and our strength as our small towns. That can also be true if in the 5,000 square foot single family home that you allow as of right with 2 tennis courts, a 5-car garage, an in-home movie theater, if you just made that a 2-family instead, it would cause enormous problems. You'd have months and months of hearings. You'd have to go out and you'd have to advertise. Your local or your neighbors would have to be notified that you're going to make this a 2-family, multi-family home. Oh my goodness, that would be terrible. But as of right, go right ahead, 1 family. It's a single family. There are communities in the state that require multiple acres of.
But that would change the character. They wouldn't be just rich white preserves.
Yeah, I mean, sure, the character of the community, which is again that courts have held to be a proxy for people who do not want to diversify their housing stock or their population as a whole. They've used character. Character is oftentimes used
code for race and income.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, what's about a devil's advocate that says maybe that's okay? Let wealthy people and white people go live where they want to live and have these boring, horrible, dead places, and have cities be vibrant places, and let's just build unlimited housing and but also get more control of the state legislature so they don't get our money to subsidize their schools.
Look, there's a tenuous balance that Connecticut has felt comfortable dealing with for over almost a century now, which was let the cities deal with their own problems and us rich suburban towns will just give them more money. Right? But that was the balance that everyone sort of accepted. And even legislators in the urban areas of Connecticut would like be part of that deal. It's like, okay,
They
well,
had a personal incentive. Yeah.
yeah, I can I'll take the money and I'll deal with it. Like you communities will just leave you alone. Well, it doesn't work. There isn't enough housing opportunity in this state, and where opportunity is tied to moving like economic mobility, you want to be able to look at the state as a whole and recognize how much better would my life be if I was able to live a little bit closer to my jobs. If I was able to go to a well-resourced school district, if I was able to live in a community close to my commute, so I don't have to own 2 cars to make my family work. I can jump on the train, I can jump on the bus, I can get to the work.
I was surprised that CCM, the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities, came out against it. Well, I thought this is the kind of thing they were for. No,
CCM is a interesting organization in which anything that in any way indicates that they may have some control taken away from their communities generally is seen as a net negative.
I know the history of zoning is interesting. It basically began as a way to keep people of color out of communities. Environmentalists used it to make sure stuff never got built. And then it kind of became this whole bureaucratic process that just made it hard to do stuff that you might want to do anyway.
Yeah, no, that's right. I mean, zoning.
But you and I probably 10, 15 years ago would have been arguing for zoning, except if we thought about what happened in New Haven in the 60s. Progressives have kind of done a 180.
I don't know that you can have zoning. You can have form-based zoning. There's a series of like zoning tools.
But why do we need zoning besides like people's health and safety? Like you don't want to pollute. You don't want to have a strip joint next to little kid's house.
Well, that's generally why you have.
What else would you need zoning for? Why do you need to decide whether you can have a business or a home or how many units somewhere based rather than let the market determine?
I mean, the health and safety components of that are the general reasons why you'd want to do that. Yeah. And we haven't really structured other government agencies to fill that void. Like you might have a different, like if you're starting from scratch, you're defining a completely different process than what you have right now. And you wouldn't have local unelected folks generally, in some communities they are elected, who have almost no training in this space, make determinations about what an individual can do with his or her property, right? It wouldn't. I don't think you could propose this form of government oversight today and have it pass.
We're talking to State Rep Roland Lemar. Has been 15 years representing the 96th State Assembly District about the recently ended session of state legislature in which progressive Democrats got all sorts of legislation passed they're excited about for child care and special ed and taxes to the working poor. And then all of a sudden, last minute, they got a bomb that a bill they worked on with the governor to do our first in a generation effort to build affordable housing in the suburbs got vetoed by the governor, and Representative Lemar was not pleased about it. You got a critique from Chip Bennett from the Independent Party, which I always find kind of interesting intellectually. I could be wrong, but I think they don't really have much of an impact on who wins elections. I could be wrong about that. But they are genuinely kind of middle of the road. They have some Democrats, some Republicans. They tend to be toward the middle. Mm-hmm. And he used to be a town official, I think, I think Glastonbury, he was like a council member. So his critique was a little different. He said the concept of fair share, which is how much you should build, is flawed thinking because it tries to move people from cities to towns, and it doesn't deal with the demand for housing from a town's own residents that might be elderly and poor, indigent, or disabled. All need housing. Well, I'm not sure about that idea, but he also said it costs a lot. So if Glastonbury were to build its fair share housing, it would cost $440,000 to units. So if you had 100,000 units, it would take $44 billion, and nobody can afford that money that you need to let the private sector fill in these gaps.
He's got this completely wrong, and I respect Chip a lot. I think he's taken some tough stands, frankly, and I appreciate anyone who enters into this conversation and wants to see ways to move the ball forward. This bill in no way required the town of Glastonbury to construct these units on their own. Just get out of the way of the private market forces that would have done it on their own.
And that's the critique from other people, is why some of the towns are saying you're helping large developers make a quick buck without being responsible. So why are you changing zoning so instead of, let's say, nonprofit housing, though they might be against that too if Glendower Group came in. But do they have a point that you're allowing big developers to come make money at the town's expense, or would the market stop a developer from building a place with enough needed parking because no one would live there if they didn't have the parking?
Look, there are market conditions on all sides of the equation here. It's hard to pencil out and make a deal work to do anything anywhere. It is really difficult. It's really expensive. There's a lot of forecasting that goes into this process. Like, there are models in which nonprofit developers have an advantage because it makes sense to take advantage of government dollars that may be utilized to ensure that things are restricted for affordable
Tax credits.
tax credits or affordable housing. And like,
But it still costs so much when nonprofits build.
yeah, it costs a lot more to like. It is not the most efficient model to use government funding to build
Is
housing.
that because of union labor or what?
It's a series of factors, a series of conditions that to go through the regulatory process and making sure you qualify, you have the necessary bonding. There's a series of protections we put in place and oversight that we put in place over every government dollar that just it does drive up the cost of government for a number of good government reasons, right? Like,
You don't want to give them to their friends or people who are no good at building. You want to make sure the right people get help by the money.
that's right. And so there's a series of problems, associated with using government funding structures, government funding sources that make it a little bit more expensive to construct on a per unit basis. And so you want to get out of the way of the private market who wants to do these things, but are constrained by, again, these local zoning rules that are in many cases were meant to purposefully exclude communities of color from entering into
What was
their
so interesting to
marketplaces.
me was so in New Haven, we went the other direction and we said a certain amount of housing, anytime you build, has to be affordable. And I asked the guy who built like Audubon's project, and I said, developer there, and I said, would you have built it if the rules were in place then that 5 or 10% of this housing had before? We said, I wouldn't have been able to afford to charging those rents. I wouldn't have been able to jack up the other rents enough and find tenants. So that became that big debate you're very familiar with among that splits the progressives, which is build, 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 let private people build as much as they can because that will increase supply in the market, build that, meet the demand and have other housing costs less. And other people say that's always theory. It never works. Stay in progress. When you build more luxury housing, more luxury people come in, and it does work to have government insist that a certain amount is affordable. And then the other side comes back and said, if it's never built, how are you getting people the money? Where do you come down on that?
I think I try to nuance my way through the debate, largely because I hear it very strongly in one ear when I go home at night.
I know what you're talking about. That, yeah.
But frankly, to be honest with you, I think the role the Board of Aldermen took when trying to craft this legislation was to look at where market demand was already strong enough to allow for a set aside for affordable.
So is that builder lying to me that he wouldn't have built it if he
I
wouldn't have
think
built 400 units or whatever at Audubon Street if
maybe
that
that
was
specific developer wouldn't have been able to make that project pencil out, but others would, and we know because they have. And you're seeing like there's like if there's enough pent up market demand in a community,
you can charge the big payers more.
You can charge them more, which it brings up the cost of development, no doubt about it. The average cost of development is going to go up if you put in affordable housing subsidies and set
You're
aside.
saying that if the market's there, it'll get built.
If the market's there, it'll get built, and it's worth it. And a public
And
policy
the other
basis,
side says
that
they're not
cost.
as confident that the market's there, that it's hard enough to build all we need. Do you believe with the build people that if you just build a lot of luxury housing, the other rents will go down?
I think that presumption, no, I don't believe it in total. I think, yes, if you could tomorrow add 150,000 units into the Connecticut marketplace, you'd see a dramatic and instantaneous drop in the average rent in the community. But in order to achieve that end, you're going to need a decade or two of continuous building supply increases.
Will Munson Street be our best test of that? You just built that huge project at 2-1 Munson. It's on a block that was within a block of 4 other very large luxury housing developments in what was a low-income area. Do you think, because people living there feel they're getting priced out by the new housing, but it's not replacing any existing housing. Will the existing housing, do you think, further down on Munson stay low? Or was it that we need a government to build the Beulah Heights project, which is 2 blocks down, that's all affordable?
I think the reason why you need affordability components in here, and you need deed restrictions and land restrictions, is because there's no guarantee. There's no guarantee in an open marketplace about what your rent's going to be from one month to the next. The best solution to ensure a continuous supply is to keep building new, right? Like the economic theory is
And
right.
that sometimes becomes like all those condos built in Fairhaven by the water in the 80s and early 90s we were told that was luxury, and they came down. And sometimes people took a bath, including some of the Winchester Avenue luxury apartments that were built. I think the developer there took a bath and sold it, and they came down somewhat. But that definitely happened in Fairhaven, where teachers and cops and firefighters are living in condos by the water there.
Yeah, and you need units in order to have. You need enough supply in order for that the baseline to exist, in which you're not in a marketplace in which rents can escalate without any protections in place. You need new supply coming in to put a pressure on the marketplace as a whole. It takes a long time though, that's why it can't just be the city of New Haven that's doing it. It can't be just one community that takes this obligation seriously. There are communities up and down the coastline who exist on a multi-billion-dollar asset with multi-billion-dollar trains running through them every day. It's the greatest economic engine the world has seen, and we can't require them to do a little bit more of this work as well. It can't just be New Haven. It's got to be a robust marketplace that isn't just contained within our 17 square miles.
And Roland, so what happens next? You guys are going to come back in a special session. You would have preferred to have it passed, and if they want to tinker, go another year. Are you going to make it better in some ways? What do you think is going to happen?
I'm worried because when we decided to give voice to those folks who used a series of dishonest and fear-mongering tactics to defeat the bill and get the governor to veto it, they're just going to have their voice amplified even more over the next few months. What is the next thing that they're not going to like? Because apparently it was just having fair share goals which turned them off. Like, is it going to be the parking requirements now? Is it going to be
Sounds like it.
Is it going to be the middle housing? Is it going to be
the 2 to 9 units that have to be as of right?
That's right. Is it going to be when we made it easier to convert commercial buildings to residential? What is the next thing that these people are going to put their finger at and say, well,
so do you think it's going to pass in any useful form?
I'm not sure. I'm nervous. These are going to be really important weeks and months ahead of us to see if we can keep this coalition together. I'd like to go back in there, and if the governor is really certain that towns want to do it, they just want to take the lead on their own, which I have decade experience at the state capitol suggesting that none of these towns want to take the lead on their own. None of them want to plan appropriately. They only do so because we put state laws in place that require them to do so. The next few weeks and months are going to need housing advocates, the younger generation of Connecticut voters, to speak up and stand up and say we demand more out of the Democratic Party here in Connecticut.
So what about the politics, getting back to the original tweet of taking on your own governor? Like, you haven't shied away from saying what your positions are on issues. You're not the kind of politician, in my perspective, who tries to get headlines by attacking people personally or saying hyperbolic things. You're really an issues person. And I would argue that, and tell me if I'm wrong about this, because you know him so much better. I think Ned Lamont's the same way, the governor. I think he doesn't like to fight with people. He doesn't like he's not even picking a fight with he likes to be liked. And he is a pretty issues-oriented individual. So you don't usually do tweets like that about the governor. What is the thinking when you're going to take on your governor with a tweet like that, and what reaction did you get from him?
I spoke with the governor's chief of staff before writing that post. I did not speak directly with the governor. My frustrations were made clear to his office, though, about what I.
So you gave him a heads up.
Yeah, I gave his.
And Lamont might understand that that's politics.
That's right.
He understands when he made that veto, he knew urban progressives were going to be upset with him.
A veto.
He understood that going on.
A veto is particularly against a Democratic legislature that has gotten, over the last 6 years, more and more in line with him on a number of policy proposals. To veto a priority bill 5002, House bills start number 5,000, and so if it's 5,002, it was our number 2 priority this year, right? And like, we worked on this closely with the governor's office and Senate Dems and came to what we thought was a broad-based compromise that would move the ball forward. If you veto that bill and you do not call and reach out to individual legislators that worked on it, there were 30 co-sponsors on that bill.
So he's figuring he can sacrifice you if he runs again. It's more of those people in the middle he needs.
That's right. There were 30. I think there are 30 co-sponsors
and is he right?
On that bill.
You guys can still throw down and work for him?
Look, I think the reality is the governor he's been governor for 6.5 years now. If he decides to run, he's going to be hard to beat, and it'll be 5.5 more years of Governor Lemar. And what does that mean? What is it about if it's not about this? What does it mean to be a Democrat right now if it isn't about tackling housing crisis? If he vetoed SB 8 too, which is protecting striking workers. Like, what does it mean to be a Democrat right now with everything that we're facing at the national level?
So would you support him to run again?
look, I'm going to support him against Aaron Stewart or Ryan Fazio, two people I actually really like, but I'm going to support Governor Lamont. But I think he needs to spend some time over these next few months and years. I mean, months and next year, telling us what this next campaign is going to be about. If he
Would you support a challenger in the primary?
It seems unlikely at this point, right? It seems unlikely. But the reality is, because no one has emerged, you don't see anyone
Josh Elliott
stepping up. I mean, Josh is like an actual friend of mine, and if Josh ran, I'd have a hard time not supporting him, just as on a personal
sounds like
basis.
You think he's not going to win.
I don't think the governor's popularity is. I don't know if there's a more popular Democratic governor in the country right now.
Yeah.
And
it's interesting.
I think the calculation has been made that you can win this state by catering to conservative to moderate Dems and suburban components of Connecticut. And again, I tell you, look at the 30 Democrats who co-sponsored 5002. Every one of them deserved a call before this bill got vetoed, and every one of them is going to ask more of the governor.
But he knows you're going to back him anyway. So why did he need to do that? He had to worry about the first selectmen of Greenwich and Fairfield and Weston.
Sure, he did. I don't know that he did. I don't know that he needed to worry about them. I think they're going to back him too. I think those folks were going to back Governor Lamont just as well as I was. Yeah. And I think he made a choice amongst a bunch of people who are going to support him anyway to favor one group over the other.
Is that because he had other voters in mind? He thinks he might be able to get.
I don't know what the political calculation is.
Does it seem kind of obvious that he feels like the people who voted for Trump but aren't MAGA are up for grabs?
Are they? I don't think Connecticut's up for grabs in 2026. I think if Governor Lamont chooses to run, he is going to win, and he gets to determine what his priorities are.
Are you concerned all about age? He does seem healthy. Still seems with it. But we're talking 5.5 years in. He will be 70. He'd be 76 by the time he was done being governor. Is that okay with you?
That's okay with me. I mean, Governor Lamont's a healthy man. He's active. He's engaged. I don't question his ability to do this job, and I do not question his capacity to do it well. I do question what it's about if it's not about something like this. What are these next 5.5 years about if it's not about fighting for folks who need an investment in housing? If it's not fighting for folks, striking workers. We're looking at what happened with Trump's NLRB. With the challenges inherent.
And you're talking about the second veto about giving unemployment benefits to workers around the line more than 2 weeks. Did anyone have any doubt he was going to veto that?
No, that one feels different because he made it clear
that he was against it.
He was well articulated that he was in opposition to it. He's made overtures to some of the union leaders in our state, Senate President Looney, that he's willing to work on it and make some concessions. We feel a little bit better about that because it was at least communicated to us what the process was. But it, like, having those vetoes hit on the same day, and this coming off a session in which we did, like you mentioned, we had some great victories, but they still were hard fought victories in which we couldn't get him to loosen some of the spending cap constraints and put more money into urban education. I think the liberal progressive wing of our party here in Connecticut, myself included, want to know what these next 5.5 years are about. What are they about? What are we doing? What is the trajectory that we're on? How are we investing in our state? How are we moving forward? I need that out of Governor Lamont if we're all going to be excited about another campaign.
And we're talking with State Rep Roland Lemar and WNHH's Dateline New Haven. So I felt like that last section when you're talking about what's realistic, what can be done, whether this person in the 70s who's a member of the establishment who doesn't stand up for affordable housing or striking workers can be challenged. You said it's really not realistic. You're saying that the week after Zohran Mamdani had that remarkable victory in New York in the Democratic primary against the former governor, supported by Ned Lamont, who basically has Lamont's take on issues, and Mamdani in New York took some pretty gutsy stands on these very issues. Does this change your thinking at all? Or are we just a different state? What do you take from that primary?
From that primary, it was exciting. It was a lot of fun to watch.
Best media I ever saw.
It was really.
I'm still hooked on it.
I know.
I can't stop watching those videos. It's been a month and a half. It
was really well done, and you watch.
Who writes those? Like, some of the writing is remarkable.
You had to have great consultants, but like if you read, like I've read some articles in the Atlantic and some in the New Republic, doing a great job sort of covering the campaign. Mamdani himself has sort of always been this person.
This great speaker. He was a rapper. So in some of the videos, he's speaking extemporaneous to people and they edit it, or a speech. But there are others like the Statue of Liberty Ferry, Staten Island Ferry Statue of Liberty was a beautifully written, remarkably shot piece of work.
It really was. I
And I
mean,
wonder who wrote that.
I don't know who wrote
Someone's
it,
going to be making a lot of money.
but given who he is, where he comes from, who his family is, it's not surprising that he might know how to find some folks know how to.
She's mom's a filmmaker.
Yeah.
So what do you take? What does the outcome mean to you for Connecticut and national Democratic politics?
I mean, I think New York City is different than the state of Connecticut, so I think like trying to draw too many parallels would lead us in the wrong direction. But I do think what he tapped into and what Brad Landers was able to tap into as well, like that if you take the two of them together and you see the total number of votes that they got and the energy they brought to the race, they're speaking to a constituency in Connecticut that I don't think is being heard right now. Younger generation, X, Gen Z.
That's what I'm saying. And you said you're fine with Ned at 76. You're going to support someone who's fundamentally against affordable housing legislation
Against Ryan Fazio and Aaron Stewart. Of course I am.
Yeah.
And if there's a compelling,
but you're saying it's not a chance. You're kind of a year and a half before the election, after Mamdani, you still feel like, and so did Elliot. I saw his comments. He was thinking, don't draw too many conclusions too. He felt like you did. I'm just wondering, like, they really changed everyone's thinking. Like, even people who were very much Mamdani didn't think he was going to win on the first round. They thought it was going to be a ranked choice thing. I mean, they didn't think he'd get almost as many votes as all the people who cast elections in the last primary. So does that tell you there might be the potential for a youth-driven, complete revolution in how we think about candidacies and politics?
I think there's
people our
space
age
in it.
don't get.
Yeah, I think there's space in it.
But
I
not
think there's room
Connecticut.
for it. I think there's even space for it and room for it in Connecticut as well. And I think it's more likely to happen because of a veto of 5002 and because of a veto of SB 8 and because
But as you
of an
point out, we
unwillingness-
don't know who that would be in the wings. What would be the constituency, not just the candidate, but the constituency.
And running against Andrew Cuomo is significantly different
Right,
than running
because
against Ned Lemar.
Lemar is likable and he tries to be likable and he doesn't harass women and
He's not a
doesn't-
sexual serial
and he
sexual
didn't take
abuser.
money away from public transit. So, like, obviously he's not a villain,
right?
The way they had a villain, but it wasn't just that.
It wasn't just that.
But you're
no doubt
right.
about
That
it.
was specific about
and,
Cuomo.
And what Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez was able to do, like,
was against the good liberal
a
congressman.
good liberal congressman who wasn't a villain in any way either, right? So there is a space for that. There is an excitement for it, and you feel it in.
And that's going to be the midterm elections when America's going to want to vote against Trumpism again, the way they did in 2018. And could that elevate gutsier younger candidates?
It could. I mean, I'd actually like to see some of those voices start to emerge.
I can't think who they'd be. When I look at Connecticut, like the young person just took over the Democratic arm is a Lamont person. He's a moderate guy.
Yeah.
In his 20s, a Gen Zer. So I'm wondering who those people are. Are we just not seeing them because we're old fogies? I mean, you're out. You're on the street.
I'm in the middle age demographic, right? Like I'm not of.
But you are an elected official who goes places all the time.
Yeah,
so you must see the.
And I'm in this,
town.
and I'm in the spaces here in New Haven where a lot of this energy oftentimes comes from, and I'm not seeing it in a way that I would hope to see. I've tried to cultivate it.
When I think about like the immigrants' right movement, some of those other groups that do have that kind of radical energy, they never coalesce on electoral campaigns. So Donnie had already won electoral campaigns. He worked on some. He won an assembly race. You know, Ramos changed the Smith. There were some others who won as well. I haven't seen in New Haven, going back to the 2013 election, when those groups were supporting Henry Fernandez and it didn't translate into any votes.
Right.
I'm wondering what that dynamic is. Is it just that there's not an interest in electoral politics the way there was in New York and how that would change?
I think the numbers are here in the city of New Haven to start something, but you quickly run into a community.
Unite Here.
Well, Unite Here helps so much and help bringing energy and.
But they're also going to
passion and
block
support.
someone who wants to knock down the establishment.
I don't know if they're going to.
They are the establishment now.
I mean, Unite Here's the establishment in New Haven, right? But they're not more broadly. And I think there's frustration amongst Unite Here folks too. And I talk to them about, like, what is the governor doing right now? Like, this is someone that we've gone to bat for. We don't know that he's got our back right now. And there are a lot of folks who are frustrated.
It sounds like you're not worried about losing to Aaron Stewart.
I'm not worried about losing to Aaron.
Fazio does win Democratic votes.
I actually really like Aaron. Like, I've known Aaron for a long time.
They both win Democratic votes, but she's positioning herself more as the Trump person.
Yeah, and so
Which is weird. That's
I don't
a
know
remake. I don't
why
know
why she's doing that.
Yeah, because she had Jody Rell backing her last time and Nancy Johnson. Yeah,
and Ryan Fazio is hard not to like, but he's also a Greenwich Republican who's pretty easy to hold some votes against him in the legislature. But he's a really likable guy, and I don't want to say that he can't win a general election.
You're just saying the politics don't match up. One thing Mamdani pushed that was responsible was that people liked was free buses. And you and I have talked about this past. During the COVID pandemic first years, we made buses free for a year in New Haven. You were the head of the transportation committee. And I asked you at the time, should we do free buses for good? Because the experiment seemed to work well. More people rode the bus. It was easier for the drivers. There was easier. It was hard to judge that it ran better because there were fewer cars at the time. But you said it would cost $45 million to do that. And that while you liked the concept, there were a lot of things we wanted to do with buses. And you never heard from anyone. And Harry just says the big, beautiful bill has just passed the Senate. Yeah, I'm not surprised about that. Yeah. You said that there are a lot of good things to do with buses, and that it was very clear from what you heard that people had other priorities. They weren't upset about paying for the bus. They more wanted better routes and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Is that still your position, or does the primary change your mind that it might be worth doing free buses in Connecticut?
The primary doesn't change my mind, and I'll tell you, when we went through this process post-COVID, we wanted to make buses free because we reduced the gas tax. And I had said, there's no way we're reducing the gas tax if we're not giving folks free bus rides. And then the conversation was about extending that in perpetuity. And we did a number of surveys among CT Transit users themselves. And what we got back was, I don't mind the $1.75. I mind that the bus stops too early, that it doesn't go where I want it to go, and that it's too full and I'm using dirty old buses. And so in my mind,
I think the buses are good. The first parts I got, but the buses are clean and nice.
I think they're clean. I think, yeah.
I love riding the bus.
And so,
but sometimes they don't show up. Sometimes they skip my stops if they're running behind. But if fares were free, they might not run behind because it really slows the bus down.
And so it does. And that was the other thing that you looked at was like when we.
So if they want more on-time buses, they might get that with free rides.
Right, because it's easier for people to get on and off.
Yeah. Sometimes it really takes a long time when they're juggling for the change and the machines are broken half the time. So I often ride the bus free just because the machine's broken.
And so we did something. I made it free for high school students, veterans, elderly. We a greater number of our population are able to ride it for free. But we wanted to use the fare generation to support those other goals as well.
More routes,
expanded services. We got more like on the old D-line. We put more money into that. We've got it running better. We're going to have Move New Haven program is really close. We've gotten all the money put in place.
Is that for those new those separate lanes and
the bus rapid transportation?
I'm concerned about that because in Oakland that backfired. People got so confused on those narrow streets they didn't know what lanes to drive in. When you have a separate street if you have a separate lane carved out on Grand and on Dixwell, it's going to make it more crowded, and in Oakland, at least, people were getting run over because the drivers were confused and they went in those other lanes.
It does take a little while.
So you're saying people can get used to it,
but people do get used to it,
just like bike lanes.
And the popularity starts to soar after the second and third year. Once people understand it, it takes a little while. Like we saw the New Britain Hartford Busway, what do we call it from the year? It's now called Fast Track. Its first couple of years, people tried to kill the program. Every year, I'd see numerous proposals to stop funding it, to destroy it, to revert it back. And like after a few years, you see ridership levels start to skyrocket. The popularity of it is really high. The number of people who take it increases on an annualized basis. It takes a little while for that type of infrastructure to work, but it is the right call. I'm open to the idea that we maybe free buses is the right answer. I just worry that on a statewide basis, this does not have the popularity that we think it does, and we will not have the continued state support necessary to make up for the shortfalls that we don't get from fare generation. When you talk about where fare-free buses has worked, it's been in cities.
Alexandria.
It's been in
some lines in Boston are trying it.
Right.
But on Chapel Hill, North Carolina, but they actually reversed it in Kansas City.
Right.
They had it, and then after a couple of years, they decided not to do it anymore.
And it's hard. Like no one has done it on a statewide basis. When I did it in Connecticut on a statewide basis,
so let me ask
I was
you
the only state that did it.
In 2023, you said it would cost $45 million. I assume it would cost more now. What would you guess?
Well, I don't know that it would cost more because we've actually made more populations free. So the delta between the population that now pays full fare.
So let's say it's $45 million.
Let's say it's 45.
We have 6 or 8 counties in Connecticut. No, how many? Is it 6 or 8?
It's 8 counties in
Okay.
Connecticut.
What's 45 divided by 8?
Well, you can't do the most
You
of the
knew where I
bus
was going
riders.
here.
Most of the bus riders come from Fairfield County and New Haven County. That's where the chief generation is. Third is Hartford County.
So I guess the northwest corner and northeast you can't count.
Yeah,
So let's say, would you say a third of the riders are in New Haven County or a quarter?
I'd say a quarter of the riders probably come out. of
Okay, so if it costs $45 million, if you just did New Haven County, it'd be 11.25.
Yep.
Why don't we just do that?
You suggesting that local communities pay a share?
No,
of
no, I'm just
for it?
saying, why don't we just make the buses free in New Haven County? That's not a lot of money. That's not needing statewide support.
It's needing statewide support to have
No, I'm
New
saying
Haven
from a-
go for free.
Yeah,
Right.
and why not do that? And then other counties, if they want it, they can. But if you're saying it's not wanted, why don't we just give New Haven something? We're giving so much to suburbs. Why don't we just give them? That's not a lot of money, $11 million. And truth is, a lot of people don't pay the fare anyway.
A lot of people don't pay the fare anyway. That is
Not
right.
not even legally, illegally they don't sometimes.
I haven't noticed as much of that.
In New York, it's 44% of the people don't pay the fare.
Our fare, yeah.
Jumpers.
So look, I mean, I
Well,
think
why not spend $11 million? I mean, inspired by Mamdani, why don't we say, okay, we're caving to the suburbs on
Paul,
everything.
Paul, I can't get $11 million more for a public school system. Like getting this amount of money, it seems like a small amount of money, but it's not. And getting the rest of the state to say, okay, sure, New Haven can go for free. Fine, I'll pay for that. It's really hard to do. That's why you've only seen it happen in city-run systems where the city itself is able to make that determination. Now, I'm open to the idea that we find ways to compensate the city of New Haven, and the city of New Haven says, "Oh, look, we'll pay for all of our residents to ride the bus for free."
And that wouldn't be 11 million but the problem is that you kind of go from Waterbury, New Haven, you go Meriden,
Yeah,
New Haven, you go Hamden to New Haven.
It gets complicated. It is smarter to do it on a statewide basis. I just don't know where I get the political support.
David Reagan says, make the Northeast pay for free bus rides in New Haven. Thanks for the comment, David. I'm not sure what Northeast means. You know what that
I'm
means?
not sure. I think it's being facetious.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Do you know David Reagan?
I don't know. Dave.
Okay. Anyway, you listen to WNHH FM State Rep Roland Lemar, as progressives often do. We've been bitching, but let's not bitch for a second. You went from Transportation Committee to General Law Committee. You passed a bill inspired by a great series of articles of the Connecticut Mirror that changes the rules of when cars can be towed. It really makes a difference, even though it's not the sexiest topic that gets a lot of attention. What was the bill? What passed? And what's going to happen?
So we made it. So this is years of effort, right, on towing reform. What you have is something called patrol tows. It was you saw it. New Haven Independent actually. I forget if it was Justin Farmer, Just in Time version of a podcast that he had with you. Came on and he talked about a
Saramonte,
a residential
everything bad happens
complex.
to that apartment
It
complex.
really does. But it wasn't just that apartment complex. It was happening across the state where communities, sometimes housing authorities, sometimes different retail establishments would have patrol tows. They just hire a tow company to go around picking up anyone that they see that may be on a white line, who may be backed into a parking spot instead of pulled in, and just towing them off someplace 30, 40 miles away. And Saramonte was a perfect example of it because they were coming in and enforcing a series of parking rules that were really, it seemed exploitative in many ways. And oftentimes they pick them up on Friday nights. They take them to their tow location, which is in Wolcott, I believe, which is a number of miles away. They wouldn't open the doors.
It's like a real working class complex.
That's right. And
you got to get a ride there. You got to find out. And then when you get there were problems, right? They wouldn't let you use a credit card.
Or they'd just be closed. And they wouldn't open again until Monday morning.
And then the fees would...
And then they charge you fees for
Friday
Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday.
So people couldn't even get their cars back.
And then you had to show up and you had to pay in cash on Monday morning. Sometimes $400.
But this is robbery.
This was awful. And so the Connecticut Mirror did incredible work. I talked with Ginny Monk quite a bit over the last year, and they had a real expose about the entire system. And then
with ceremony as Exhibit A.
Right. And a lot of these tow companies, like the companies themselves, not taking credit cards, not taking alternative forms of payment, requiring cash, not making you aware of the fact that they were going to totally your car, they were going to take your car by adverse possession, essentially, and not compensate you for the full market value of that vehicle. And the whole process.
Everything with towing over the years in New Haven even was corrupt. I remember the places where they were taking people's cars, not letting them get back, and that kind of stuff.
That's right. And
the contracts given to insiders and the rules not enforced.
That's right. And so we needed to open up and reform this
So
process.
what does your bill do?
So Department of Consumer Protection, Department of Motor Vehicles, working together to have a consumer bill of rights on what your rights are. If your car is towed, there's got to be notice on every parking spot about what the rules are. If it gets towed, where it has to go. You have to take alternate forms of credit card. You cannot charge for days in which you're not open. You have to make all the possessions in your vehicle open to that person to retrieve at any point in time. And if you cannot get your car because of the pay, you have a payment plan that you can enter into and then receive your vehicle. I mean, it really makes it so people are not just losing their property, having it taken away and held in a location 30 miles away at all hours. I mean,
did you affect how far away it could be?
We didn't limit how far away it could be, but if there was another reasonable location that could be towed to that was closer.
How did it feel to get that passed?
It felt great. I mean, I spent a lot of time working on the details of it, and at first, like, the opposition came from like housing authorities who were concerned about their ability to take abandoned vehicles off their lots. And so we just had to, like, we spent a couple of years like trying to work through what the rules
I love
are.
that about the legislative process, to try to get it right and hear from everybody, but still do something that needs to be done.
Right. And sometimes you have to make a decision to go. And I got to be honest, you'll appreciate this. The Connecticut Mirror articles, like the lens that journalists put on this issue made it possible, because I was running into people who just didn't fully understand
Or believe it.
They didn't believe it. They thought, like, well, Roland's hearing from a couple people and he's trying to change state law. And instead, when they were able to
That's
put the
awesome
numbers
to shout journalism makes a difference.
it
Didn't make a difference for campaign workers in Bridgeport. We all wrote about a lot of sleazy things they did, but why didn't that law pass to try to put if someone cheats in an election and work on election, they can't work on the next elections and collect petitions?
I don't know. Like, that's one of those things that wasn't in my committee.
Because there was no question about that. Legal, people were convicted.
Yeah, it felt like that was moving forward. I'm not sure why that fell apart in the last few weeks.
Maybe good government does not have the same constituency and urgency, that when you have to decide what's getting weighed at the last minute, it doesn't get over the line the same way.
Yeah, maybe the advocacy base in favor of that wasn't pushing particularly strong.
But you did expand state aid for childcare.
Yes.
Call transporters. No, everyone up to 100,000 will not be paying. Families make up to 100,000 will not pay for childcare. You will not pay more than 7% of your income.
That's right.
16,000 new childcare and pre-K slots.
$80 million to put into childcare facilities to help people expand with their offerings.
And is that all going to go to the Children's Center, or is somebody else going to get some?
No. It'll be broad. It'll be broad in who applies. And tax credit programs for home-based childcare owners. $500 child tax credit if you own and operate a childcare facility in your home. Like, it's really going to make a difference for folks.
So is this the definition of a progressive bitching session? We spent 2 minutes talking about huge victories that are going to affect tons of people.
That's right.
And we spent 49 minutes talking about stuff we're pissed at.
We dramatically improved special education for we did a lot of great stuff this session. You are right. But it's also right for constituents here in New Haven to ask more of me, to ask more of democratically elected governors who are standing in the way of real progress.
Well, good luck in the special session, Roland Lemar. Let us know how it goes.
I appreciate that.
Thank you so much for coming back. Thanks to Harry Droz. Thanks for who's working the controls as the station manager. Thanks for David for sending in your idea. I do look forward to know what you meant about the Northeast. Roland thinks you're just joking. I don't. I think it's a reference to something.
Sure.
This will be a clue. It's on X, and you can trust on X even if you're not verified. I hope David's verified. We're going to take it out with the Afro-Semitic Experience performing I Wish I Knew How It Feel to Be Free from the group CD, A Plea for Peace. This is Paul Bass inviting you to fly free with us all day and all night on WNHH, New Haven's home for community radio.